Why did the amber warning light feel louder than the screaming engine? At 37,000 feet, silence is supposed to be comforting. It's supposed to mean stability, control, safety. But when the master caution light flooded the cockpit in amber, Elise's heart felt something old stir inside her chest. Not fear, not panic. Memory. The left engine's temperature needle surged past the red line like it was trying to escape the dial itself. The metal beneath their feet screamed in a pitch no passenger would ever hear. The kind of scream that only pilots and ghosts recognize. Engine 1 failure, her co-pilot Noah said. His voice cracked at the end as if his throat hadn't decided yet whether it wanted to cry or shout. 27 years old, 4,000 hours logged, a good pilot. Not yet broken. Elise didn't look at him. Her hands moved in a rhythm she hadn't used in years. 4 counts in. 4 hold. 4 out. 4 still. 236 people behind them trusted that breathing pattern with their lives, even though none of them knew it existed. She pressed the rudder, holding the aircraft straight as asymmetric thrust clawed at the fuselage, trying to roll them into the sky's open grave. Midwest 718 declaring emergency. Her voice didn't tremble. It didn't rise. It carried something heavier than fear. Noah felt it, even if he couldn't name it. She wasn't reacting. She was recognizing. Because Elise's heart had seen this death before. The vibration wasn't random. It wasn't mechanical coincidence. It was patterned, measured, almost intentional. Restart attempt 1, Noah asked. Her hand stopped his. No, she said softly, listen to it. 3 beats. Pause. 2 beats. A compressor stall signature. Restarting would kill the engine faster. He stared at her, confused. That term didn't exist in civilian checklists. It belonged to fighter pilots, to carrier decks, to places Elise was never supposed to talk about anymore. But he obeyed. Because her eyes weren't afraid. They were remembering. In the cabin, Sonia Chen tightened her grip on the intercom as passengers whispered prayers, clutched hands, and tried not to imagine what a falling plane feels like. Elise, Sonia said quietly at the cockpit door, they're asking what to do. Elise didn't reach for the manual. Tell them heels back, heads down, hands locked behind the neck. Sonia blinked. That's combat crash posture. Do it. 236 people folded their bodies into positions meant for war, not vacations. And far below them, the land waited. White patches of farmland gave way to darker terrain, rolling hills, forest, stone. Too much stone. Kansas City was too far, too heavy, too hopeful. We won't make it, Noah whispered after running the numbers. Elise already knew. She unfolded a paper chart, one no one used anymore, and traced her finger slowly across faded airfields until she stopped on a small blue circle. Request vectors to Whiteman. Noah froze. 6,000 feet of runway. It's what we can reach. He didn't argue. Because when someone speaks that calmly about the edge of life, you listen. The aircraft began its descent. And in row 12, a 71-year-old Navy veteran named James Brennan slowly leaned forward, his heart pounding in a rhythm he hadn't felt since carrier decks and midnight seas. Through the cockpit window slit, he watched Elise's hands. The posture. The economy of motion. The breathing. He whispered to himself. That's not a civilian pilot. His son used to sit like that. Before he died. Why were 2 F-22s approaching a civilian emergency? At first they were just specks, white against blue, but they closed fast, too fast for coincidence. 2 Raptors slid into formation off Midwest 718's right wing, their silhouettes sharp, predatory, unmistakably military. Noah glanced over. They're probably just escorting. They're observing, Elise said. Observing what? Or who? The radio crackled. Ghost, this is Raptor lead. Visual on your approach. Ghost. Noah turned sharply toward her. That wasn't a civilian call sign. Elise didn't answer. Because she knew that voice. And it knew her. My father was at Fallen, the Raptor pilot said quietly. Class 72, Lieutenant Marcus Webb. Her hand tightened around the throttle. She didn't reply, but her eyes flicked to the worn leather wallet tucked behind her seat. Inside, two young pilots smiling in front of an FA-18. Both dead. The right engine coughed. Once. Twice. Temperature rising. 18 minutes. She had 18 minutes to undo 5 years of silence. The runway at Whiteman appeared on the horizon, a thin line surrounded by forest and stone. Too short. Too unforgiving. And somehow perfect. She pulled the plane down steep, aggressive, controlled. Not a civilian descent. A carrier descent. No float. No mercy. In the cabin, Brennan's stomach knew before his mind did. She's flying it like a deck, he whispered. She's planting it. The right engine surged. Then died. Silence swallowed the cockpit. They were gliding now. Pure physics. Pure consequence. No second chances. No go-arounds. Only Elise's breath. 4 in. 4 hold. 4 out. 4 still. She aimed for the very beginning of the runway. Not the safe zone. Not the recommended zone. The only zone that would save them. The ground rushed upward. 50. 40. 30. Impact. The aircraft slammed down, bounced, screamed, shuddered, and slowed. Smoke rose from the brakes. Sirens flared. They stopped with 300 feet of runway left. 300 feet between life and history. For 5 seconds, the world held its breath. Then the cabin exploded into tears, prayers, laughter, shaking hands. 236 people learned what survival sounds like. The tower's voice cracked. Midwest 718, welcome to Whiteman. Elise finally let her hand tremble. Just a little. Why did the ghost of Top Gun return today? Brennan didn't clap. He recorded. Because he recognized her. The articles they buried. The instructor they blamed. The woman they silenced. Commander Elise Hart. And now, the same failure pattern had come back to kill her. But she didn't die. She landed. And she brought proof with her. Serial numbers. Telemetry. Witnesses. Live streams. The truth couldn't hide anymore. 3 black SUVs raced toward the aircraft. Federal. Urgent. But the passengers didn't move. They stood. Veterans. Families. Children. They formed a living shield around her. You want to question her, Brennan said loudly. Do it in front of us. Phones rose. The modern defense against silence. The maintenance chief's tablet pinged. Same defective parts. Same serial batch. Same lie. 17 more aircraft were in the sky. Elise didn't hesitate. Ground them now. They said they didn't have authority. She said, then write down who ignored the warning. They grounded them. And lives were saved. Again. And again. And again. The truth began to breathe. Why does dignity act instead of speak? Hours later, under flickering command center lights, Elise finally told the story she'd buried for 5 years. 2 students. Two perfect pilots, engines that failed, parts that shouldn't have been there, a company that chose profit, a system that chose silence, and a woman who chose exile to protect a lie she never believed. Until today, a young F-22 pilot stood before her, Marcus Webb's son. He handed her his father's final letter. "You gave us wings," it said. "What we do with them is on us." She cried for the first time in 5 years. Not because of pain, because of release. Outside, more planes landed safely. More families lived. More ghosts finally found peace. Elise didn't return to Top Gun. She didn't stay quiet. She chose a harder runway. Truth, accountability, justice for those who never got to land. And as the sun fell behind Whiteman's hangars, Elise's heart stood beneath a sky that no longer felt like a grave. Sometimes dignity doesn't shout. Sometimes it doesn't beg. Sometimes it simply acts. And when it does, hundreds of lives come home. Why did the fighters arrive before anyone admitted how bad things really were? They slid out of the clouds like quiet predators, smooth and unreal against the wide Midwestern sky. Two F-22 Raptors, matte gray, no markings that mattered, moving in perfect formation beside a crippled passenger jet that was already flying on borrowed breath. From the cabin windows, some passengers thought it was a coincidence, a training route, a lucky moment to see something rare. But in the cockpit, Elise's heart felt the air change. Not the pressure, not the temperature, the meaning. Her right engine temperature needle climbed again, slow, patient, deliberate, as if it already knew how this story ended. "Right engine trending hot," Noah said quietly. She nodded, already moving, bleed air adjustments, fuel routing, load shedding, motions so small they looked like instinct. But nothing she was doing was instinct. It was memory. The F-22 off their wing tipped slightly, the pilot's helmet turning just enough for her to feel the stare. Elise didn't look back. She kept her eyes forward, breathing in four-count rhythm, her jaw set in the kind of stillness people mistake for calm. They weren't escorting. They were confirming. Confirming that the failure looked exactly like it had before. Confirming that the signature was real. Confirming that the ghost hadn't stayed buried. The radio cracked with a frequency bleed. Not civilian, not tower. "Ghost, this is Raptor lead. Visual on your descent profile." Noah's head snapped toward her. "Ghost." Elise didn't answer. Her hands tightened on the yoke, not in fear, in restraint. In the cabin, James Brennan leaned forward again, his hands gripping the armrests. His knees hurt. His breathing wasn't right, but his mind was sharper than it had been in years. He had seen pilots like this before. Carrier pilots. The way they manage energy, not speed. The way they cut corners on paper, but save lives in reality. The way they speak in clipped syllables, because on a pitching deck you only get 2 seconds to explain your soul. He watched Elise's posture. The seat position was wrong for comfort, but perfect for control. She was sitting like someone who had landed on moving steel in darkness. And suddenly his stomach dropped. Because he remembered the articles. The ones that disappeared. The instructor they blamed. The woman they buried quietly. Commander Elise's heart. The right engine coughed again. This time harder. 18 minutes, Elise said quietly. That's our clock. Until, Noah asked. Until it decides whether we live. They were descending faster now, steeper, not the soft civilian slope meant to preserve comfort and silence. This descent had teeth. The Ozark Plateau was rising beneath them. Forests, stone, nowhere flat enough to forgive a mistake. Kansas City was still ahead, but Elise had already erased it from the map in her head. Too far, Too heavy, too optimistic. Hope was a luxury she could not afford. She reached for the paper chart, fingers tracing lines only muscle memory could still read. Her nail stopped at a small blue dot. Whiteman Air Force Base. Short runway. Joint use. Unforgiving, but reachable. Request vectors to Whiteman, she said. Noah froze. 6,000 feet isn't enough. It is if we don't float, she replied. He swallowed, then nodded. In the cabin, Sonia Chen's voice came over the intercom, steady but tight. Brace position, remain seated. Mothers pulled children closer. Veterans instinctively folded into posture. A teenage robotics team held hands like they were praying without knowing how. 236 people bent their bodies, the way Elise had told them to. Not knowing they were following instructions written in blood, not ink. The right engine surged again. The temperature needle flirted with yellow. "Come on," Elise whispered, the first hint of emotion in her voice. Behind her seat, a worn leather wallet slid loose from her bag and fell onto the center console. Noah saw the photograph before she could grab it. Two young pilots. Flight suits. Smiling. Arms slung around each other in front of a Super Hornet. Both of them gone. Her hand covered the photo. "Focus on the approach," she said. But pain had already flickered across her eyes. The Raptors stayed with them, sliding slightly ahead now, clearing airspace, cutting a path through invisible layers of military coordination Elise could feel but not see. This wasn't coincidence. This was recognition. And someone out there knew exactly who she was. The radio crackled again. "My father trained at Fallen," Raptor lead said softly. "Lieutenant Marcus Webb, you probably don't remember him." Her throat tightened. "I remember all my students," she whispered, but she didn't transmit it. Because if she did, the wall she had built for 5 years would crack. And she didn't have time to bleed. They were approaching Whiteman now. 6,000 feet of concrete, surrounded by forest and unforgiving silence. White Man Tower, Midwest 718 emergency inbound. "Cleared to land," the controller replied, and his voice trembled. "Cleared to live." The descent steepened. The right engine began to surge in deeper waves, coughing, gasping, protesting the lie inside it. Noah's hands hovered uselessly above the panels. "This isn't normal," he whispered. "No," Elise said, "it's familiar." She disconnected the autopilot. Her left hand took full control. Her breathing returned to the 4-count rhythm. The Raptors broke formation, peeling away and leaving the airspace clear like silent guardians stepping back from an altar. And now there was only concrete ahead. And consequence behind. She lined up the nose. Not with the middle of the runway, but with the very beginning. "No float," Brennan whispered in the cabin. "No mercy." The right engine screamed one last time, then died. Silence rushed in. They were gliding. Pure gravity. Pure truth. Pure Elise. "Don't touch anything," she told Noah calmly. Her voice did not belong to fear. It belonged to finality. The runway rushed up. The numbers grew large. The forest edges blurred. 50, 40, 30. And Elise's heart pulled back, not to soften the landing, but to claim it. Because some landings are not meant to be gentle. They are meant to be survived. And sometimes the only way to bring everyone home is to stop hiding and fly straight through the truth. Why did the runway feel smaller the closer it came? From a distance, Whiteman's concrete strip looked thin but manageable, a pale line carved into forest and cold Missouri earth. But as Midwest 718 dropped lower, faster, heavier, It began to look less like a runway and more like a test. A question written in stone. The right engine's temperature needle trembled against the yellow band, quivering as if it were afraid of what waited beyond it. The cockpit smelled faintly metallic now, overheated air and stressed systems whispering their warnings in scents only pilots notice. Noah's throat tightened. "We're heavy, too heavy." Elise didn't respond. Her eyes were locked forward, not on the runway itself, but on a point before it, a place no civilian manual ever asked a pilot to aim. She wasn't flying toward a touchdown zone. She was flying toward a truth she had been running from for 5 years. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane dropped through a thin layer of cloud. Someone began to pray out loud. Another whispered the name of a mother who wasn't on board. A child asked if the shaking meant turbulence. Sonia Chen knelt in the aisle, pressing a trembling hand to a young boy's shoulder. "Just keep your head down," she murmured. "The captain has you." Sonia believed it. She believed in the calm in Elise's voice, not the rehearsed calm of training videos, but the quiet of someone who had already survived the worst thing that could happen to them. The right engine coughed. Harder this time. The aircraft yawed slightly, then corrected. Elise's boot pressed into the rudder pedal with firm, measured pressure, not fighting the airplane, but guiding it. 7 miles, Noah called out. Elise lowered the flaps. The aircraft protested. Its wounded systems didn't like configuration changes, but she needed drag. She needed the nose down. She needed energy bled, but not too much. Every move was a calculation, written in muscle memory. The way you fly when the book can't help you anymore. The way you fly when the runway moves in your dreams. 6 miles, Noah said. The F-22s were gone now, but their presence lingered in the air like witnesses who had already taken notes. Elise whispered again, "Just a little longer." The right engine surged, then steadied. But its temperature climbed another degree. The Ozark trees below looked like a dark ocean. No open fields, no mercy. 5 miles. Elise reached for the gear. "Gear down," she said. Noah hesitated. "That's early. We need the drag." The wheels dropped with a heavy, mechanical groan. The aircraft slowed, reluctantly, like it knew it was giving up altitude it might never regain. Inside the cabin, Brennan felt the change immediately, the way a sailor feels a ship lose wind. "She's planting it," he whispered again. "She's not floating." His hand shook, but not from fear. From recognition. Because he finally knew who she was. The woman they had erased. The instructor they had blamed. The pilot who had taught men like his son how to fly into darkness and still come home. 4 miles. Flaps again. More drag. More resistance. More commitment. The right engine coughed deeper now, as if it were drowning. "Captain, we're losing it," Noah whispered. "I know," Elise said softly. "Count with me." 4. Hold. 4. Hold. 4. Hold. Her breath didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. They were no longer landing. They were striking. 3 miles. The runway numbers grew large enough to read. White. Bold. Unforgiving. She aimed for the very beginning, not the safe zone, not the recommended zone, but the truth zone. The place where mistakes were not allowed to exist. The right engine surged violently, then fell silent. Dead. The cockpit filled with a new quiet. Not peace. Finality. "We're gliding," Noah said. Elise nodded. "This is it. No thrust. No forgiveness. No second chance." They were a falling promise. The altimeter unwound. 500 feet. 400. The trees rushed closer. The runway filled the windshield. Elise advanced the dead engine's throttle, not to give power, but to change drag, shaping the fall with invisible physics. Her movements were precise, deliberate, almost gentle. 300. 200. Noah's fingers dug into his armrest. He wanted to look away. He couldn't. 100. The automated voice began its countdown. 50. 40. 30. Elise pulled back, not to soften the landing, but to claim it. The main gear slammed into concrete. Hard. True. No float. No drift. The aircraft bounced once, twice. She forced it down, standing on the brakes, thrust reverser screaming on the only engine that still lived. Smoke burst from the wheels. Speed bled off. 3,000 feet. 2,000. 1,000. The end of the runway raced toward them. 800. 600. 400. 200. They stopped. 200 feet of concrete left. For 5 seconds, no one spoke. Then the cabin exploded. Crying, prayers, laughter, hands shaking. 236 people realized they were alive. Elise released the brakes. Her hands finally trembled. Just a little. And somewhere behind her, a man whispered into his phone camera. The ghost came back. Why did silence feel heavier than the impact? The plane sat still on the far end of Whiteman's runway, its engines cooling, its tires steaming faintly in the cold Missouri air. For a few long seconds, nothing happened. No applause, no screams, just the quiet crackle of hot metal contracting and the soft hum of emergency vehicles idling nearby. Then the cabin exhaled. It wasn't a cheer at first. It was sobbing, ragged, shaking sobs that sounded like lungs remembering how to work. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone whispered thank you into the air as if God might be sitting in the aisle seat. A child asked if they were allowed to breathe again. Sonia Chen wiped her eyes, steadied herself, and finally stood. "We're on the ground," she said into the intercom. Her voice cracked, but it didn't break. "Remain seated. Emergency crews are approaching." In the cockpit, Elise's heart rested her forehead briefly against the yoke, not in exhaustion, in acknowledgement. Her breath still followed its 4-count rhythm, but now there was a tremor in it, not fear, release. Noah stared at her, his face pale. "Captain, how did you even know?" She didn't answer. She reached for the tiller, beginning the slow taxi toward the ramp as fire trucks rolled into position like an honor guard. Outside, the Raptors reappeared, circling once. Then one peeled upward while the other stayed level. The missing man formation. A tribute reserved for the fallen. And Elise finally looked at the sky. In the cabin, James Brennan stood on shaking legs and raised his phone again. He wasn't filming passengers. He wasn't filming emergency vehicles. He was filming her. The woman at the front of the plane. The ghost. His fingers trembled as he pressed record. 5 years ago, he whispered into the microphone, they destroyed a legend to protect a lie. Today that legend brought 236 people home. He sent the clip to his daughter, then to his daughter-in-law, then to 3 journalists he trusted. Subject line: "The ghost of Top Gun just saved our lives." As the jet shut down at the ramp, Elise reached for her wallet again. The photo stared back at her. Marcus Webb. Patricia Harrison. 2 smiles frozen in a world that didn't deserve them. "We did it," she murmured. "This time we did." Noah watched her, finally seeing the truth in her eyes, the grief she carried, the anger she buried, and the quiet fire that had never gone out. "They were your students, weren't they?" he asked gently. She nodded once. "It wasn't pilot error," he said, "was it?" "No," she replied softly. It was profit. The cockpit door opened. Sonia stood there, tears streaking her cheeks. "They want to thank you." "Evacuate them first," Elise said. "Thank me later." But the passengers didn't move. They stood. Veterans, parents, children, the robotics team still clutching their trophy. They formed a loose, instinctive semicircle around the aircraft's stairs, not as fans, as witnesses. Black SUVs rolled across the tarmac, too fast, too quiet. Federal. Urgent. Someone important had noticed. A maintenance chief hurried up the ramp holding a tablet, his face already drained of color. "Captain," he said, showing her the readings. "These failure signatures, they match something from 5 years ago." Elise didn't look surprised. "They will. They're Kellerman parts." The word hung in the air like a match struck in a dry forest. "They were supposed to be destroyed." "They weren't," Elise said quietly. "They were reused." More SUVs appeared. Agents in dark jackets stepped out, moving with purpose. "Captain Elise Hart," the lead agent called. "We need to speak with you immediately." Elise squared her shoulders. Military posture returned in a breath. "Of course," she replied, "but my crew debriefs with me, non-negotiable." Behind her, Brennan raised his phone higher. "You want to question her?" he called out. "Do it in front of us, we're not leaving." More phones came up. Live streams began. Modern daylight. The maintenance chief's tablet pinged again. "Captain, I'm seeing the same serial numbers on 17 more aircraft." 17. 17 more ticking clocks in the sky. "Ground them," Elise said. "We don't have authorization." She stepped forward, eyes blazing. "I just landed a Boeing with 2 dead engines because someone tried to bury me. Ground them, or write down who ignored the warning." The agent hesitated. Then keyed his mic. "Fleet-wide ground stop, effective immediately." Somewhere in the sky, alarms would sound. Lives would be saved. And Elise Hart, the woman they silenced, was no longer a ghost. She was a reckoning. Why did the truth feel more dangerous than the crash itself? The command center lights buzzed faintly, casting long shadows across rows of uniforms and dark suits that filled the room. Air Force blue, Navy khaki, FBI black, NTSB gray. People who had been trained to look calm in the presence of catastrophe now wore the kind of stillness that comes when they realize catastrophe has been hiding inside their systems for years. Elise Hart stood at the head of the table, hands resting lightly on the cold metal surface. Her posture was straight, her expression neutral, but inside her chest, 5 years of buried anger pressed against her ribs like a second heartbeat. She had survived the crash. Now she had to survive the truth. "State your name for the record," the lead investigator said. "Captain Elise Hart," she replied evenly. "Commercial pilot, former commander, United States Navy." A ripple moved through the room. "You're here regarding today's emergency landing." "No," she said quietly. "I'm here regarding a pattern of failures that's been killing pilots for at least 5 years." The room went still. She didn't rush her words. Because this wasn't a confession. It was an unveiling. She spoke of Marcus Webb and Patricia Harrison, of their skill, their discipline, their final flight. She described the engine fluctuations, the failed ejection, the second engine dying moments before the runway. She described the maintenance records that didn't match, the serial numbers that reappeared where they were never supposed to exist. She described how she had been told to stay quiet, and how she had disappeared instead. No one interrupted her. They couldn't. Outside the building, news vans gathered like vultures circling a secret that had finally begun to bleed. James Brennan stood at the front of the growing crowd, his phone still recording, his voice calm but burning. My son died 2 weeks after her students, he told anyone who would listen. Same failure, same silence. Inside, a technician gasped. Captain, I'm seeing matching telemetry flags on 17 other aircraft. 17. More ghosts waiting to happen. Elise leaned forward. Then they're still killing people, she said softly, just slower. A tablet chimed again. New data. More red flags. More proof. The room began to move, calls made, screens lighting up, commands flowing outward like blood returning to a numb limb. And then the lights flickered. Once, twice, they died. Emergency, red flooded the room. Communications jammed, a security officer reported. Unmarked SUVs outside. Elise moved to the window. Private security. Not federal. Not protective. Predatory. Kellerman, she said quietly. The name fell like a curse. Her phone buzzed in an agent's hand. A message appeared. A photo. Her apartment. Her parents' house. Her brother's car. They weren't threatening her. They were reminding her. Let me talk to him, Elise said. No, the agent replied. He reached out to me, she said. That means he wants something. They patched the call through. Richard Kellerman's voice was smooth, cultured, dangerous in its calm. You should have stayed quiet, he said. My students should still be alive, Elise replied. You're endangering national security. You're endangering families. You can still stop this. My life ended when you chose profit over truth. The room listened. The confession hung between them. And when he finally admitted his parts were defective, casually, almost bored, Elise didn't shout. She simply let him speak. Because the truth was already winning. Minutes later, sirens approached. Real sirens. Real federal vehicles. Not private security. A news alert flashed across a screen. Kellerman Defense CFO turns whistleblower. A woman in shadow spoke on television. We knew, we paid to silence families. We falsified certifications. The lie cracked, then shattered. An agent approached Elise. They're arresting him. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Not in relief. In remembrance. We got them, she whispered. But she wasn't finished. Because ghosts don't rest until their names are spoken. And Elise's heart was just getting started. Why did peace feel heavier than the war ever had? The night settled slowly over Whiteman, wrapping the command center in a blue-black quiet that felt unreal after the chaos of the day. Helicopters still thumped in the distance. News vans still glowed at the gates. Phones still buzzed with names, accusations, histories being pulled out of the dark. But for the first time since the runway had rushed up to meet her, Elise's heart was standing still. The world was finally listening. Inside the command center, screens showed red dots scattered across the country, aircraft that had been grounded, diverted, or pulled out of the sky just in time. 300 more lives, 400, then more. Pilots were calling in, reporting the same temperature spikes, the same compressor stalls, the same silent threat hiding inside trusted machines. Elise moved from screen to screen, guiding voices over radios, walking unfamiliar crews through the same narrow corridor she had just survived. Her words were calm, precise, protective. Don't restart it. Begin descent now. Trust your energy, not your fear. You have the field made. And one by one, more planes landed. More families lived. More ghosts were denied a chance to be born. Hours later, when the last diverted aircraft touched down safely, the room finally exhaled. People leaned back in chairs they hadn't noticed were hurting them. Coffee went cold in untouched cups. Some cried quietly. Others stared at their phones, watching headlines explode across the world. The ghost of Top Gun had become something else. A reckoning. An agent stepped up beside her. "They have him," he said simply. "Kellerman was arrested trying to flee the country." Elise nodded once. Not in triumph. In closure. Admiral Chen approached, her face softer than Elise had ever seen it. "The Navy wants you back," she said. "Full reinstatement. Top Gun would take you tomorrow." Noah added quietly, "Midwest wants you as chief pilot, full authority." Elise looked at the screens again, at the red dots that represented lives that had nearly become numbers. "There's a third path," she said. They listened. Every unexplained crash, every suspicious failure, every family that was told to accept silence, we find them all. James Brennan stepped forward. "You won't do it alone. 63 families have already reached out." The FBI agent nodded. "People are ready to talk." A commission began to take shape in that room, not as paperwork, but as a promise. The Webb-Harrison Commission, named for 2 young pilots who never got to land. Later, outside beneath a sky scattered with quiet stars, a young F-22 pilot approached her. Marcus Webb's son. He handed her a wooden box filled with journals, notes, and a sealed envelope. She opened it with trembling hands. "You gave us wings. How we use them is on us, not you." Her breath caught. For 5 years she had carried the weight of their deaths, as if it were her fault. Now finally she could set it down. As the pilot rendered a final salute and walked away, Elise stood alone for a long moment, holding the box, listening to the quiet. Above her, a commercial jet crossed the night sky, lights blinking steadily, safely. Protected by truth. Tomorrow she would meet presidents, rebuild systems, reopen investigations, and fight powerful people who did not want her to exist. But tonight, she simply breathed. 4 counts in. 4 hold. 4 out. 4 still. Somewhere in the dark, the ghosts finally rested. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And when it does, hundreds of lives come home,